My name is Chetan. So let's continue from where we had left. So in the last video, we talked about what do you mean by loops in Java, right? So we talked about while loop, then we also talked about for each loop, right? Now in today's session, okay, let's talk about what do you mean by statements, right? For example, you have a if statement, you have a switch case, right? So let me create a package, let's say with statements, right? Now in this case, I will create an example. Let's try and work with if else. Okay, now I'm going to create a main class, so main method. So every program should have a main method in order to execute it. Okay, so let's say I have two numbers. Let's say integer. Let's say I have integer age equals to, let's say, maybe 21, right? Now based on this age, I want to make a decision. For example, if the age is greater than 18, then you are eligible for license. If it is not greater than 18, then you are not eligible for a license. So how do you perform this in Java, right? So in this case, we have to go for if else. So just type if and just say control space, right? So as I said, this is a ID, so it's gonna give you suggestions. So for example, I'm gonna have if statement, simple. What is the condition? So condition is age greater than 18. If that's the case, then just say sys out you are eligible for license for DL basically, right? So there is no else part to it here, right? So now this gets evaluated at runtime and it gonna give you a boolean value, right, whether it's true or false, and then it will go inside this block only when this is true, right? So the main difference between a loop and a statement is that statement only gets executed once, right? Now the way you have if, you also have something called as if else, right? So if the age is greater than 18, I'm gonna say here you are eligible for license DL, right? Otherwise, I'm gonna say here sys out you are not eligible for DL, right? Like this. Perfect. So if I execute this, let me put a sys out with this is if else we are talking about, right? And the first one is a plain if, right? This is just to differentiate our output, right? So this is if like this. Okay, now if I execute, see, you notice that the first you are eligible for license for DL because this condition is true. Again in second, again this is going here, right? Now, now guys, in Java, okay, in Eclipse, there are different perspectives, right? Now the perspective which we are working on right now is a Java perspective. Do you see here Java, right, on the rightmost top here, right? If I click on this icon, you would see there are different perspectives which are there in the Java. Now the two perspective which we're going to use is Java is the default one, and at times we might come across a debug perspective whenever we want to debug our programs, right? Now let's select this debug perspective. So if you see here now guys, in case of a debug perspective, the look and feel of my Eclipse has changed here, right? So in the middle I see editor, then I have a console over here. On the right hand side, if you see, I have variables and breakpoints, right? Here I can see the debug view, outline, and so on and so forth. Now if I want to switch back to my the original perspective, again guys, you can click either here and select Java, or you can simply click on this icon as well, J. This is nothing but a shortcut for Java perspective. So if I click here, do you see again the perspective had changed to a default perspective. Now where is this useful, right? For example, I want to see here what exactly, how exactly this program is getting executed. For example, I have, let's say, h2 equals to, let's say, I have 17. Now I want to see at runtime how the conditions are getting evaluated. Okay, so if you see here, I'll put a breakpoint over here. So breakpoint is nothing but you want to halt your program, or you want to pause your program at this particular line. You can put any number of breakpoint, guys, like this. So if you see, I have two breakpoints at line number 7 and line number 13. So all you have to do is just double click on this blue line wherever you want. For example, I wanted to have a breakpoint on line number 7, so I went here on this blue line and I just double clicked, right? So do you see there's a breakpoint over here? Now, even if you have breakpoints in this program, and if you do a normal execution, for example, this, okay, just right click here and just say run as Java application, the program is not going to stop anywhere. Okay, so with breakpoints, even the program has not paused. So in order to pause this program, you have to execute this in a debug mode. Okay, so just say debug as Java program. Usually we do run as Java program. Now we have to do debug as Java program. There is a other way. So if you see this icon over here, do you see this debug icon? Okay, and if you see, when you click on this, just a second. So when you run a program in a debug mode, your Eclipse will ask you whether do you want to switch to a debug perspective, which I just showed, right? So here, just say no for now. Okay, I don't want to switch to that perspective. I'm fine with this perspective, so just say no. Now guys, over here on the top, if you see, now you have options on how you want to execute from here, from line number 7. So you have some three options, that is step into, step over, and step out, basically, right? So I will just do step over, because when we will learn methods, then step in will make a lot of sense, right? So just say step over. So if you see, do you see this condition got evaluated and it has written true? So if I want to see that, just select this section, select this particular line of code and just right click and just say add to watch, right? So if you see at runtime, it is showing that this got evaluated and the value as written as true. That's the reason it went inside over here, right? Again, do step over this one, so it will go to next line. So again, it will be printing if else on the console. Now this time age 2 is 17, right? So again, it is asking you the confirmation whether do you want to switch to a Java perspective, debug perspective. Let's say this time we say yes. Okay, so if you see, the look and feel has got changed here, and if you see, we in the program we were having two variables, right? So in the variable section, these two variables are shown here, and these are the values which we are storing in there, right? Whereas if you click on breakpoints tab, if you see at line number 7 and line number 13, I had given the breakpoints. So this tab is just giving me, just showing me that at what all lines you have the breakpoints in your program, right? This is a console. Now if you see, I'm gonna just do a step over. Now if you see, this age 2 is less than, sorry, is not greater than 18. Again, if I do right click watch, so you would see here, see in the expressions, now it has written false, and that's the reason it's going in the else, right? So this is how debug will help you at times, guys. Okay, now my program execution is over. Now again, I want to switch back to my Java perspective. So again, I'm going to click on this rightmost top Java icon, right? So this will take me back to the original Java, or rather the default Java perspective, right? Okay, now there is another way of writing if, that is, and that is, guys, if else if, like this. Okay, so let's see what this particular syntax means, right? Just a second. For example, let's say I want to say here, okay, if let's say again same thing, will say let's say int age 3 equals to, let's say now this time it is uh, 80, like this. Okay, and I'm going to say here if age 3 guys is greater than 21, sorry, greater than 18. Okay, then I'm going to say here, okay, you are, sorry, sys out, you are eligible for driving license. So if it is greater than 18 and guys age 3 is less than, let's say 80, if this is the case, you are eligible for license. Otherwise, else if, again I'm going to put a one more condition here, if the age, let's say if the age uh, is greater than 80, I'm going to say here, sorry, we cannot issue the DL. Okay, and simply, and otherwise I'll just say here you are underage, right, like this. So if you see here, okay, I have two conditions. This is one condition, this is the other condition, right? And so using this if else if you can have any number of conditions, right guys? So again if I execute, so again I'll put a debug point over here, and if you see I'll run it in debug mode, right? Now let's see. So this is a save, this was a save pop-up notification. So let me say no, I don't want to go in debug mode. Let's do step over. Okay, so wherever there's a debug point, it's gonna ask you for the confirmation, right? So let's go here. So again at line number 21 there was a debug point. So see now it is going to the last section basically, right? Understood? So this could have been ideally 82, so it will go inside this particular line, right? All right, so this was all around if statement, right? Now there is another statement, or rather a switch case, we can call it a switch case in Java, right? Okay, now here what happens is basically, so again just say main control space. Okay, now just type guys switch, okay, and just say control space. Okay, that's the, see, that's the beauty of your Eclipse, it will give you all the syntaxes, right? So let's say I'm gonna say here string, let's say country name. Okay, and let's say the country name is India, right? Now guys, based on the country name, okay, so this is my condition basically, right? So if the country name, and this is the values basically, let's say this is India, right? Then let's say I'm gonna have one more case here, let's say some 2 3 cases. Okay, for example this is, let's say US. Okay, then let's say I have UK, like this. Okay, and I'm gonna say here simply sys out, okay, let's say welcome to India, right? Then I will say here let's welcome to, let's say US, right? And last I'm gonna say here welcome to UK, right? Now as I mentioned earlier guys, if your code is not properly intended, okay, let's say like if you see this line is coming over here, it starting from here, which doesn't look good, right? So just press Control A, Control I. Okay, so it's gonna indent all your code in ID properly. Okay, so what was the shortcut? It's very simple. Okay, so it's Control A and then Control I basically. Okay, right. So now guys, if I execute this program, okay, just a second. So if you see here, it's gonna print you welcome to India. Now if I just say US here, okay, then guys this should print welcome to US. So what is happening here? This is your string, right? So this is nothing but a condition, right? And this condition is matched against these cases. So wherever you find a matching case, that block gets executed, correct? So in this case, if you see, this block got executed. Now there's a meaning to break. It means whenever this line gets executed, you want to break the program basically. You don't want to proceed further. That's the reason this break is very important. If you remove this break, it keeps continuing, it keeps executing this line as well, which we don't want, right? So that's the reason in switch case, every case should have a break basically. And if guys, if there is no matching condition, then the default condition gets executed. Let's say mismatching country name, right? So if I see now, just a second, let me do US 1, and if I execute this, see it says mismatching country name, right? Right, understood. So this when we will be creating keywords in Selenium, of course this switch case would be useful, right? So if it's a click keyword, then a click gets executed, right? If it's a let's say set text keyword, then this gets executed, so and so forth, right? All right, yeah. Okay, so let me close all this, right? Now now guys, after this we gonna work on something called as methods, right? And let me tell you guys, methods is a very important concept in Java. Okay, so please try to understand this concept. Okay, so let me create a simple basic example of a method, right? Now now first of all, what is a method and why do we need it basically, right? For example, let's say guys, I want to perform the addition of two numbers. Let's say I have integer n1 100, let's say integer n2 equals to 200, and I have to perform the summation of these two numbers. So usually I do something like this. Okay, I keep adding these two numbers. But let's think of a scenario where you want to perform addition of such 100 combinations, right? Let's say this time it is 100 200. Next time guys, let's say it is some different number, right? Like this, let's say it is like this. Okay, so so if you see here, the kind of the kind of task we are performing here is repetitive in nature, right? So of course if I keep doing this 1,000 times, okay, so so there is a disadvantage to it, right? Number one is that, of course, this is not the efficient way of programming, right? I cannot keep writing this code 1,000 times, right? So just imagine 1,000 means roughly we would be writing 3,000 lines of code, right? If I want to perform addition of 1,000 combinations, right? So to avoid this guys, okay, we have something called as methods in Java, right? So here if you see what kind of action I'm doing, I'm trying to perform an addition here. So so whichever task I'm doing repetitive in nature, I'm gonna create a method of it, right? For example, add method, right? So how do you create a method? So you have to follow some syntax. Just for example, public static void, let's say add, like this. Okay, open bracket, close bracket, then open curly bracket, close curly bracket, right? Now now if you see here, okay, now if you see here, okay, in this program I've simply created an add method, and if I execute, and let's put some line here, something called as, let's say, add method, right? And if I execute this program, see the program gets executed as it is. Okay, it will, the JVM will come to main method, it will start executing from line number 4, okay, till line number 15. But since this method, we have created a method, but we haven't called, right? So when a method is just there in your program, but it is not called or invoked, this code will not be executed at all, right? So let me just copy this program and just paste it, okay? So that we will do the changes in this program now. So now what I'm going to do here, I'll just delete this repetitive code, okay? And now I have a main method and I have a, so this is also, so main is also a method, guys, okay, which is called by JVM, which is invoked by JVM. Now I've created an add method. So if you see here, when your method needs to be called, you have to just take the name of this method and call it in the main method basically. Now if you see, if I execute this program, see, it is going to call the add method. So I'll put a breakpoint at this line, and if I run it in debug mode, you can see it now. So my execution has paused here. Now guys, here step in will make sense, basically the first option, this one. So if I do a step in, your control will move to a method basically, because this is a method call, right? And then again it will return to the main method basically, right? So method, whenever you have any method in your program, unless you call it, it will not be invoked basically, okay? You need to call method in order to invoke it basically. Now guys, a method can be invoked any number of times. For example, I can call this add method any number of times as I want basically, right? So if you see, I'm calling this method 3 times basically, right? Do you see here? Add method is called 3 times basically. Just a second. Yeah. So, so a method needs to be called in the main method in order to trigger it basically, or a method can be called within a method as well, right? Now, if you see, guys, I'm calling the add method, but still my purpose is not resolved here, right? I'm not able to perform the addition of two numbers yet. So a method without argument is not helping me out here, right? So now what I'm going to do here, okay, I will simply create a method with arguments basically, okay? So I'm going to say here, just let's say method, I'll just name this as method with arguments example, okay? Now if you see, in this case, methods with argument example, now I'm going to say this is a add method which accepts two argument of type, let's say integer, let's say num1 and num2 basically, right? And then within this method, I want to perform the addition of these two numbers over here basically, right? So I will say here num1 plus num2 basically, right? Now of course, now the my method definition has changed. Now my method is like, it's the add method having two arguments, okay? And the sequence is that the first argument is integer, second argument is integer. So when I call it, of course I have to call the way I have defined it. I cannot simply say add without arguments, because there is no method like this. So I'm gonna say here add, and I'll simply say here I want to add two numbers. So I'll pass 15 comma, let's say 25, right? So in this case, guys, the way you have defined the method, you need to call it in the same fashion. So this is a add method with two arguments, so you have to make sure you pass these two arguments while calling it. So in this case, when you execute this code, so this 15 gets mapped to number 1, okay, and this 25 gets mapped to number 2, because it's the sequence in which you are passing the arguments, they are mapped to the same sequence, right? Now again, I'm going to put a breakpoint here, if you see here, okay, and let's execute in a debug mode, right? Guys, this is a save and launch notification, because I'm doing changes in this program. So this is just asking me a notification whether do you want to save, okay? So I'll just say okay. Now again, I'll say debug perspective no, I'll just say uh, no here. Now I will do a step in. So if you see, it will jump to that method, Okay, and if you see guys, now this 15 gets mapped to num1. So if I just do a mouse over on num1, do you see 15 is coming in num1, whereas num2 has got 25 value. So these two values, they are mapped to these two method variables, method arguments, and then within the method guys, I'm doing the summation basically. So if you see, 15 plus 25 summation is printed on your console basically, and then my control will again go back to main method basically, right? Now let's say I'm doing one combination of summation. Let's say I will do few more like this. Okay, so let's say I want to perform the addition of these two numbers like this. Okay, like this, or maybe like this. Okay, so what will happen again, 787 gets mapped to this and 2885 gets mapped to num2, and the summation will be performed. Again, I'm at line number 9, same method I'm trying to recall. Again, 175 gets mapped to num1, this gets mapped to num2, and like this. Okay, so if you see here guys, if I execute, I will see the summation of all these three combinations on the console basically, right? So what we can conclude here, so method should always have a name, and depending on scenario, it may have arguments and it may not have the arguments, right? Now the way you have defined the method, you have to call in the same way basically. For example, this is a method which is having two arguments, so I have to of course pass these two arguments while calling it, right? If I just say add like this, it will complain because it says that there is no method which with the name add and having no arguments, right? Like this. Okay, now at times, okay guys, at times we might want to perform this summation in the method, okay, and we want to return that value in the calling method basically. For example, I want to do the summation of 1525, and whatever summation I would be getting, I want to retrieve that and perform multiplication on that summation with some number. Okay, so in that case guys, okay, something called as a return type of a method comes in picture. So I'm going to say here method with, let's say, return value. Okay, so if you see here guys, okay, now let's say I want to perform the summation of these two numbers through this method. Okay, and then whatever value, whatever summation is happening, I want to return that summation over here and then multiply that with, let's say, 10, right? So in that case guys, we have to, so first of all, let's hold this summation in some integer. Sum equals to, this is the summation of these two numbers, right? Which is I'm holding where guys, I'm holding it in a integer sum variable basically, right? And this sum I want to return to the line where from where I'm calling it, right? So simply you have to use return sum basically, right? Now the moment guys you write down return sum, so this method should return a sum. So earlier it was not returning anything, so we were mentioning void here, right? But now what type of data it is returning? It is returning a data of integer. So you have to change this void to the respective data type, that is basically integer, right? If it was returning a double sum, then of course you will change this data type to a double. If it is returning an array, then you will say array, like that. Okay, so earlier this was not returning anything, so we were keeping it as void. The moment you start returning something, this void should be changed to a respective data type, right? So now guys, if you see here, so now this add, if I just do a mouse over on this add, see, it it tells you that it is returning a value in the form of integer, right? So if I just say here guys, if I just take it in sys out, so it is going to print that value on console basically now. Okay, so if I just execute this, see, it's gonna print you that 40 value. It is returning, this line is returning, this method is returning 40, and then it is printing on a console. Or there's the other way around, I can also assign this return value to some variable. For example, now let's say I want to perform the summation of 115 and let's say 225. So it will perform the summation of these two numbers, and it will return me a value in the form of integer. Let's say I'll say my sum, and then I want to print this my sum on the console basically, right? So sum of two numbers like this is nothing but I'm using the concate here just to give the meaningful output basically like this. Okay, making sense? So now if I do in debug mode, if you see guys, okay, so what should happen, it when I do a step in, the control will go to a method 115 gets mapped to this. So if you see here, this gets mapped to num2, right? And then it is doing the summation over here, right? See, the summation is happening now. Sum is the summation of this number, and then I am returning this value over here, and which gets assigned to my sum basically, right? So if you see, my sum is 340 and I'm printing that on a console basically. Understood? A method with a return type. So I gave an example of addition of two integers. You can also create a method which performs addition of two doubles, or which performs maybe for example, I want to send array to a method, and I want to perform the summation of all array elements within the method. That can also be done. Okay, fine, right? Okay, now guys, we can learn something called as method overloading example, right? Now what do you mean by method overload, right? This term is very popular in Java, method overloading, and it's a very common thing asked in an interview, right? Now let's say guys, I want to perform summation of two integers, for example 15 plus let's say 65, or at times guys I might want to perform the summation of two doubles as well, right? For example like this. Okay, or guys at times I might want to perform the summation of numbers which are in the form of array, right? Like this, right? But if you see, now the purpose is same here, right? At one time I want to perform addition of two integer, at one time I want to perform addition of two doubles, at times I want to perform addition of all elements of the array, right? So in this case, if you see, the purpose is same but the data is different, right? So for example, I create public static void, let's say add, I want to perform integer num, for example integer num2, right? So this is a method guys which performs addition of two integers, right? But as I said, now how about this, when I want to do the addition of two doubles, of course this method is not going to help me, right? Because it is capable of adding only integers, it cannot add doubles, right? So in that case, how do we handle this situation basically, right? So in this case guys, what I'm going to do here, okay, I will create a method with the same name basically, add, but I will say with different arguments, right? Let's say double, let's say double one, and let's say double two guys. Okay, and then I will perform the sum like this. Okay, so now let's say if I call add with two integers like this. Okay, so in this case this method gets triggered because this is a method which is matching to this call, right? Now in case if I call add, let's say with 78.5 comma let's say 67.5, in this case guys this method gets triggered, right? Because this time I'm calling, just a second, this should be double. Okay, this method gets triggered, right? Because for this line this is a matching method, right? Now in this case, if you see guys, that both the methods are having the same name but different arguments basically, right? So this concept in Java is called as overloading. Basically, when you have same method with different arguments in the same class, this concept in Java is called as method overloading, right? Now what is the advantage here? The advantage is very simple, right? Because I don't want to confuse the end user with all different methods. I want to keep the method name same, but its implementation is different as the arguments are different, right? Now the third thing is, like, if I want to do the addition of all array elements, so again guys, I'm gonna create one more overloaded methods overloaded method, let's say add, but this time I will take argument as, guys, array, right? For example, I'll say integer, and I will say nums, let's say my nums, right? So I have created a add method which is accepting an argument as an integer array, right? And then within this method I want to do basically the summation of this array, right? So I just say for control space, I selected the first option over integer over array, and I'm gonna simply say here integer sum equals to 0. Okay, and guys, I'll just say here sum equals to sum plus this my nums of I, right? And then once the summation is done, I'll just print the sum basically. So if you see here, guys, I have a same method with different arguments basically, right? So depending on how I pass the data to it, a respective method gets called, right? Let's say this is my, right, this is my numbers, like this. Okay, and I'm gonna pass now over here, right? Fair enough. So this is how I'm able to solve my problem statement with the help of method overloading, right? So in the upcoming session, of course, we're gonna come across a lot of overloaded methods. Okay, so if I put a debug point here, guys, okay, I'll put a debug point over here, and let's execute and see how the control moves here, right? So if you see now, I want to add two integer. So which method should be triggered? This one, right? So if you see here, if I do a step in, if you see the control is moving to this method which is adding two integers, right? Now again, if I do step over, if I go here, now I want to perform addition of two doubles. So which method should get triggered? A matching method should get triggered, right? So if I just do like this, see, the control is coming like this, right? Okay, fine, right? So we can, so we have come to a stage where I want to conclude something basically. So every method, guys, has something called as method signature. Okay, method signature always contains method name. In this case it is add. Okay, then method arguments. Okay, and very important is their sequence, guys, right? Correct. So method signature means a method name, its argument, and their sequence, very important, right? Now let's say I have two methods, let's say like this. Okay, one is returning integer, and let's say one is returning, let's say integer, like this. So if you see, guys, I have a method which is performing addition of two numbers, integer numbers, but it is returning nothing, so that it is void. Again, guys, I have another method again which is again performing the same operation, that is addition of two integer, but it is returning integer, right? So are the method overloaded? So the answer to this, no, right? They are not overloaded, rather they are duplicate methods. Okay, so return type, guys, keep this in mind, return type is not a part of your method signature. Okay, why? The reason is very simple. Why it is giving error? Because when this line gets executed, it will get confused which method to be called from these two, right? Because both are accepting two integers, although the return type is different, it will get confused. So guys, return type is not a part of your method signature, and if you have this kind of scenario, then these are treated as duplicate methods. Okay, so let me just, I'll put it like this. Okay, and I'll say this is duplicate method as arguments are same here. Okay, return, so I'll say return type will not make any difference here, right? All right, I hope everybody is pretty clear with methods, because this is very important from a Selenium perspective, right? So when we will come to Selenium, of course we're going to create a lot of methods. For example, whenever we test any web application, we create a lot of methods, reusable or common methods, reusable or repetitive actions. For example, set text, I can create a method set text. Okay, or we can also create a click as a method, right? Or maybe I might want to create a method, let's say verify text. Let's say this will take two arguments, let's say expected string comma, let's say string actual string, like this. Okay, so in Selenium we're gonna create a lot of methods, guys. Okay, for example, another, let's say test pass, like this, test fail. Okay, then you have text screenshot. So in Selenium we're gonna create these kinds of methods, because for any testing automation we do such kind of repetitive action. So in this case we have to go for methods basically, right? All right, guys, so thanks for watching this video, and we'll stop here, and the next video would be around module 3, where we're gonna start on oops concept. Yeah, okay, all right, thanks for watching this video.